Hello and welcome to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the Premier League, the A-League and more. Today on the show, a top half of the table more open than Leeds' defence. Bilic becomes the first manager sacking of the season as West Brom smash the in case of emergency Big Sam button. Meanwhile, managers who can't manage keep on managing, and strikers who can't score suddenly start scoring. And here to help me wade through it all is Jesse. How are you today, mate?
Man, I'm good. What a treat it is to be able to get up in the morning and watch a 5 a.m. and then a 7 a.m. I mean, admittedly, I didn't catch the first half of the first games, but a couple of days in a row, actually in a relatively friendly time slot for us here in Australia, it's just glorious.
The 5 a.m.s are particularly rough for me, I must admit. If I'm inclined to get up for them, it'll be like the second half. So, yeah, but the 7 a.m.s are just prime time, especially like with working from home. You know, you don't have to jet off to work. It's very good. I actually love a morning game. Even better if we can start getting to the pub over this festive period. That'll be the dream, I think. I'm of course Colby, your host, and thanks for joining us on this midweek pod. We thought we'd put a midweek pod together because we're of course recording our A-League season preview on the weekend, so we wanted to make special room to have another Premier League pod this week, so that we can fit in lots of A-League chats. So look out for that hitting your podcast feeds on the weekend. So what I thought we'd do today is not the usual own goal moments of the week, but we'll just whip into the midweek Premier League games that we've seen this week. And I guess, Jesse, since it's just you and I at the moment, Damo might join us at some point, but since it's just you and I, let's indulge and kick off with the Liverpool Spurs game from this morning. Liverpool 2, Spurs 1, thanks to a Firmino 90th minute winner. Jesse, the man only scores big clutch goals.
Yeah, I thought for this moment, I mean, the podcast listeners won't be able to see this, but I'm just going through a few of my Firmino shirts. This is a lovely one, but most recent one, obviously, I'm very proud of is the Firmino one from last year. And I think one of the reasons why I'm doing that is because I've leapt to his defense quite a bit, at least in the last 6 months or so when he's been getting criticized, because I understand that football is a very impatient sport, and it's like if you don't score for a couple of weeks, all of a sudden you're in a crisis. And I understand that results are everything, but in a team that has been doing so well over the last 12, 18 months, even longer, I think Klopp said it in his interview today. It's like when Firmino's not scoring goals, everyone else seems to care about it except Firmino and Liverpool. And personally, as a fan, like I love Firmino because I'm not going to go into the value that he adds to the team. I think it's pretty obvious, but there's this kind of fallacy that he doesn't score goals. And like, obviously he has, patches where he doesn't do much in front of goal, but when he does score, they tend to be in massive moments. In recent times, I remember the PSG Champions League game where he knocked them out. Sorry, he didn't knock them out, but won in the last minute in the group stage. He won us the Club World Cup last year. So he does tend to score in the big games, and in those moments, maybe Mane and Salah can't come up with the goods. So put a bit of respect on the man's name is what I've been saying for a while, and it's particularly satisfying that he was the man to sink Jose in the 7-2-1 formation.
And a couple of questions on this, because this is a bit of a theme throughout these midweek matches that we've seen of sort of strikers who you wouldn't necessarily associate with being prolific, just coming out of the woodworks and scoring big goals. So we've got a question from George, who is still out frolicking the pubs of London before their impending lockdown. He asks, who was the most surprising scorer in this match day? Was it Benteke, Theo Walcott, Haller, or Firmino? And I'm going to add to that. Let's not forget Giroud.
Yeah, I think it's between Haller and Benteke. And I think Benteke did score recently, I think. But personally speaking, like Benteke has just been one of those players that I've just watched it and just been completely stunned with how much of a fall from grace he's had in the last couple of years. So I kind of think, even though he might have scored recently and broken the duck, I still think Benteke is a surprise. It's a surprise that he's starting and getting more game time, let alone scoring. So I think he just edges it for me.
His drought was so long and so protracted, I suppose, that like I think you know, when like strikers go through a sort of dry spell, and then they, you know, they'll get a pen or something like that, and their confidence is back, and off they go again. I feel like Benteke needs like 5 goals at least, like in quick succession to really start to get his confidence back. I don't think 1 or 2 here and there is gonna really do it for his confidence. Is that shattered that I think he needs more.
Yeah, he doesn't even most players would be out the door just because it's Crystal Palace and they don't tend to sort of move people through the door that often. He's just kind of stayed there. Like most players would be shown the door and be like, "You're not good enough, out you go." And Benteke's just, I don't know. He's, you know, he may as well just turn into a pro gamer and gone home because he's added that much value to Palace in the last couple of years. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery to me.
And we've also got a question from our mate Lee Broxham Fiction. Jesse, I think this one's probably for you. He's just wondering why it's Si Senor when Bobby Firmino scores, given his native tongue is Portuguese.
I mean, if you're going to keep coming to these questions, Lee Broxham Fiction, you might have to be called Lee Broxham Fado, because this is a great question. The answer is that if they put an M on the end of the Si Senor, it can still apply in the Portuguese. However, where you're correct is that I think it's more of a Spanish song than it is a Portuguese song. So they're essentially singing a Spanish song to celebrate a Portuguese player. But then, you know, if you're sort of questioning why they're doing that, well, these are the same people. I mean, I say them, I mean English people who most of them are still calling Diego Jota, Diego Jota or Jota, and call him Jose Mourinho when there is no Jose in Portuguese. It's just Jose. So they'll call Joe Linton instead of Joao Linton. So these are the same people that you're hoping are going to get a subtle difference between Portuguese and Spanish. And unfortunately, I think that's maybe a little bit beyond them. As much as I love the cop, I don't know if they're sort of, they've got the nuances between the two cultures.
So, Jesse, you don't think the English fan base are sweating these kind of cultural nuances like Lee Broxham Fiction?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, as I said, you know, it is a great song, and I think at the end of the day, it's like if it's a banger, it makes it onto the cop either way, even if that means steamrolling a little bit of the culture side of things.
And this game, Jesse, I mean, aside from the game itself, which was a cracking game, which we all saw this morning, but it had some Mourinho moments, particularly after the game, and he came out on his Instagram. But after the game, he was quoted saying, "I told him, Klopp obviously, that the best team lost, and he disagreed, but that's his opinion." Jesse, did the Portuguese Pulis get it right here?
Well, I read somewhere that somebody was saying that it was just trying to take the heat off his players, which I thought wasn't actually a bad shout. He does tend to do that. Yeah. I mean, he can also pile heat on his players, but we have seen him in the past strategically sort of try and create a distraction, which sort of pulls the media away from actually having to go at his players. For example, you're not really hearing much about Harry Kane missing a sitter from right in front of the goal. That you most times you'd think that would be a leading headline, but instead all the headlines I've heard, at least from what I've heard from BBC Live and that sort of thing, has all been about Mourinho's comments to Klopp after the game. So it's working. What he's doing is working, and I do think
this is a vintage Mourinho, isn't it? Like vintage Mourinho in a good way. Like he hasn't started Mourinho death spiral yet, and I think if Spurs were to go on a run of bad form and started tumbling down the table, maybe you'd see a turn into that, and he'd start throwing his players under a bus and start doing all the other trademark Mourinho moves that we're used to seeing in that spiral before he inevitably leaves a club with flames behind him. But at the moment, it's sort of like vintage good Mourinho, and
he's not quite Darth Mourinho just yet.
No,
Colby, what did you make of the sort of the strategic arm wrestle? Because most of the other chat, aside from the Mourinho Klopp discussion, has been, you know, how Spurs kind of deserved to win the game, and then you've got another part of Twitter that's all about no, Liverpool deserved to win the game. Where do you sort of sit? Like, what was your sort of opinion?
Well, I mean, I thought this game was definitely an arm wrestle. Like Liverpool were all over Spurs in the first half, but could only manage the one goal through Salah, and then in the second half, I mean, Spurs, like, yeah, they didn't have possession, but they were so effective with the ball. And they should have. I mean, really, midway through the second half, they should have had 2 or 3 goals. They were countering so effectively, and the way they were soaking up pressure, they never really looked threatened, even though Liverpool had a lot of touches in their final third. I thought it was a cracking game. I thought a draw, I mean, probably would have been a fair result, but I mean, if you can pull out a clutch goal like that at the end, like Liverpool did, that's how you win those games and crack the defense open. Because sometimes the balance of pressure just yields those, and that's the risk you run if you play a Mourinho style of game. Sometimes you get the point, sometimes you jag a win, but sometimes you get a clutch goal scored against you the last kick of the game. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things about this game was Mourinho genuinely believes that he was robbed because he executed his game plan almost perfectly. And he's sort of thinking, well, is it fair? Is this a fair result? He doesn't think it's a fair result. Whereas Klopp's thinking, I had all the possession, I had all the positive play, I deserve to win. And I guess what I'm saying is that what I've seen so far on Twitter is 2 ideologies, people that are kind of in Mourinho's camp and people that are kind of in Klopp's camp. And it's quite interesting because I don't think either side is particularly right. I think it just comes down to your perspective. I don't think that Spurs would have not deserved to win, but I do think that one of the things is that what's ironic here is that Liverpool would have been criticised to have all the ball but not win, however, Mourinho's game is all about being clinical, and they weren't clinical. And they didn't take those chances. And I saw a stat before that Damo put in the group about Son just being ridiculously high above his XG or expected goals. Like he's just been just stupidly clinical. And I was having a conversation with Callum, who's just made a comment there early in the week. And one of the things we were talking about is, can the Spurs players just keep doing this? I mean, even from a fantasy perspective, when people are going on and on about them.
And I think that efficiency comes from Mourinho's, the way that Mourinho plays, right? Like Son's getting those kind of efficiency stats because of the way that Mourinho's got them playing.
But it's all based on that idea that if you only get 3 goals a game, you've got to score 3 goals a game. You can't miss all 3 chances, because if you miss all 3 chances, you don't get anything. So I think it just goes back to the point that they've been ridiculously efficient in front of goal. And this is one of those days where when they didn't take their chances, they actually were left to rue it. On Callum's comment there, which, it's a good bit of banter there. So in Portuguese, it's always Jesse. There's no 2 syllables, it's just Jesse. So, I don't think my wife's family in Portugal even know that there's an E on the end of my name. But that's one for you guys playing at home.
Well, I mean, the listeners can pronounce your name any way they want, but so we did mention the game, and we will move on to the other matches, but we're not beyond basking in a bit of Mourinho chat and getting amongst that on this podcast, because he's just a goldmine for this kind of shit. Like the Instagram post where he was saying that the post denied us the victory we deserved, and some of that was just peak Mourinho that we have to mention. But we also go on, Jesse.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, I mean, before we move on to the next games, I didn't have a chance for an own goal this week. We weren't going to do that. But one thing that if I had have done an own goal, which I thought I'd slip into this section, is I'll just give you a bit of a transcript of Tim Sherwood live on Amazon Prime. So if you haven't seen this, listeners, you need to get on Twitter. It's got Tim Sherwood everywhere. It's got videos from this morning, and he was live watching the game with Robbie Savage. And he goes, another corner. Not too worried about this corner. I mean, it might come back to bite me, but I think Tottenham have the dominance in the air. So not sure anyone can get their head on the first ball for Liverpool, apart from that one. And Robbie Savage goes, oh, Tim, it's Firmino. It's the 90th minute. And he goes, wow, what a header. What a header. He just was made to look like the biggest idiot live on TV. It was just one of those pieces of TV gold.
The other angle to this, Jesse, is obviously we love to trash Mourinho, but Scott, aka Mr. Worldwide on Twitter, wants us to talk about how much of a dick Klopp's becoming. So what have you got to say about that?
Yeah, he does do some strange things. Like, I love Klopp, and I'd probably defend him as sort of stoically as I do with Firmino.
He's got a bit of a punchable face, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, I can kind of
the way he just like flashes those fake teeth, especially when he's like just jagged a win, and you're just like, get fucked, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's Liverpool's dentistry has got a lot to answer for. I mean, they've got Firmino, Fabinho, Coutinho. I mean, all the Brazilians have been through there and got their teeth done, and Klopp's decided he wanted a piece of that.
Are they getting a group discount? I hope so.
I mean, it's just envy, really. I mean, I think we all wish we had teeth that white. I mean, I couldn't even dream of getting teeth that white. So, full credit.
So next up, we've got Arsenal 1, Southampton 1. Theo Walcott scores against his own club with a beautiful dinked finish. He's got that arm strap energy on again. We saw it the other week with the Jamie Vardy little arm brace where he's just getting the source of his power from. And then just celebrates. I mean, it's not quite Adebayor areas, but it's not a muted celebration either. What did you make of this, Jesse?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised, actually. Like, I know that he... I mean, similar to Oxlade-Chamberlain, they both spent a long time there, and both have links to Southampton and the coast. And I think we've seen from Oxlade-Chamberlain a pretty respectful sort of approach every time he's played Arsenal. And I don't think Walcott was terribly disrespectful. I mean, could he even play against them last season for Everton? I can't remember if it's because it's technically the parent club, I think, at that stage. But yeah, I was a little bit surprised to see him react like that. I kind of wonder why players do that, because, I mean, you've only got a small little bit of time to celebrate. And I kind of think that to avoid all the aftermath, you may as well just keep it muted, because, the Southampton fans aren't going to care and the Arsenal fans are certainly going to care. So why sort of put your reputation a little bit on the line? I mean, yes, you might.
I wonder what this would have. I wonder what this would have been like with a stadium full of Arsenal fans, whether he would have celebrated so vigorously or whether that would have made him dial it back or what. But it was a lovely goal, and we've got to mention Aubameyang sort of breaking his drought, at least scoring for Arsenal anyway. But Arsenal
nice
now
goal.
are like, what are they, 15th or 16th? I don't have a table in front of me, but they're right down there now. I mean, can we start talking about whether they're relegation threatened? Is that stupid? Like, are they too big to start having that conversation?
Yeah, it's too, like, the silly thing about that part of the table is that it only takes like 2 wins and then you're out of it. And that's how condensed the table is. Like, for example, there are teams that are on 20 points. I think City's on 20 points from memory. And Arsenal's got, 14 points? So we're basically talking about Arsenal being in crisis and being completely off the boil and Arteta to get sacked, but they're kind of 6 points away from a team that's relatively close to the top 4. So I think it's just kind of, it's such early days. I know it's not early days because we are getting on in the season now, but it's not quite Christmas yet. And I feel like maybe we'll be having this conversation in the first week of January and Arsenal have completely shat the bed.
Well, we love it. We love a knee-jerk overreaction on this pod, and we do tend to notice these minor things and make a massive meal of them. But one thing that's sort of flown under the radar is Southampton. They're up to 3rd now, I believe. Are they flying under the radar?
When you said knee-jerk reaction, I thought you were segueing into West Brom and changing managers, but we'll talk about that in a second.
It could be a segue for that, yeah.
But on your Southampton comment, I think they are going under the radar just because they're Southampton. It's not anything against the club. It's just the reality of things. We spend so much time talking about these other clubs that Southampton just go about their business, and I think they've done remarkably well without Danny Ings. My only concern about them, which I mentioned in a pod or so ago, was that they seem to get quite tired in the second half and fade away a little bit, and that can sort of come back to bite them if they can't concentrate for 90 minutes. But yeah, Big Ralph is doing things with them, and again, the higher they get up the table, even if they do have a bad streak after Christmas or around Christmas, they would have got enough points to be really safe by that point. So good on them.
Yeah, well, let's talk about City and West Brom. We've had the first manager sacking so far, Jesse, after West Brom's quite good point, you'd have to say, against City. Completely unexpected. West Brom go and pull the trigger and smash the Big Sam emergency button.
Wow.
I mean, great to have Big Sam back in the league, but poor old Bilic has been sacked from another Premier League job that it was probably always a bit of a poison chalice, but what have you made of this whole situation?
Well, I just had a wee funny thought there, just thinking of Sam Allardyce and how long he lasted in the England job. So hopefully he lasts a little bit longer than that. But the whole situation's it is pretty brutal by West Brom, but at the same time, I think they were basically just at a point where they just couldn't see themselves getting them out of the trouble that they're in, and now they're just thinking short term and just avoiding relegation, staying in the Premier League.
Can he keep them up?
I think he can. I think he could keep them up, but it would have to be like a team like Brighton or something above them to shit the bed and to drop into the bottom three rather than West Brom necessarily being prolific, because I think they will get some results, but can they get enough? That's what Sam does. He just gets draws and they sort of crawl their way back up the table. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But I did listen to a podcast today that was talking about the West Brom fans. It's hit a bit of a crescendo with how discouraged they are with the style of football they're playing. So we often have a go at West Brom because we think they're boring as hell, and they are. But the fans are actually pissed off about that now. And so there's this conflict between the owners and the fans are like, well, if we're going to get relegated, we might as well play football. And the owners are looking like they want to sell, and it's just a bit of a shit show over there at the moment.
Well, West Brom are relevant now. Like we were saying, and we tweeted this morning that like who even plays for West Brom? No fucking idea. Can you name it? Like no one can name a person that plays for West Brom.
Wasn't that Sergio Aguero?
He's gone.
Sergio Aguero on their bench. I mean, Charlie Austin. Sorry.
Charlie Austin apparently plays there. But now, they've gone and got Big Sam, and we have to start talking about them. So, I mean, they're finally relevant again. But poor old Slaven Bilic, is he just going to go to another championship club that's on the brink of promotion and do it all again?
I don't know. I mean, poor old Slaven, like he probably had another punditry position somewhere and just wait for the next vacancy. I feel a bit sorry for him. He's been chucked out of a couple. Yeah, I mean, I always remember his exit from West Ham and that sort of thing. He just looks so depressed on the sideline in the weeks leading up to getting sacked. It's quite sad to watch.
Something that's not sad to watch, Jesse, is Chelsea losing again or dropping points again. But they lost this week to Wolves 2-1 right at the death. Pedro Neto settled it at the last minute for Wolves. Giroud scored in this game, and then there was an equaliser from Pedence. But I mean, let's just get into Fat Frank, Jesse. Kazanaki on Twitter wants us just to talk about fraud Lampard all day long. Chelsea they've failed to beat every team they've faced this season who sit above them 12th in the table. So they lost 2-0 to Liverpool. They drew 3-3 with United. Drew 0 with Spurs, lost 1-0 to Everton, and now lost 2-1 to Wolves, and they've got West Ham next. So, what's going on?
Well, I mean, at risk of agreeing with myself, and I think Damo, when we were talking the last pod, we were talking about the question marks over whether or not they can dig in and play against teams that actually are going to challenge them and physically sort of try and have a go, and Wolves did that. And interesting thing about this game, which is easy to forget, is that Chelsea went up 1-0 and Wolves actually had to come back to win 2-1 at home. And this was another one of those games that I ended up watching the highlights again, but I did watch the second half live. And yeah, it just seemed like it was just Wolves were going to pinch it. And then it just like the ball goes through, and Neto just like, how clutch was that?
But the thing is, Chelsea were up, obviously. Wolves equalised, and then towards the end of the game, Chelsea were pressing for the win. We've seen Mourinho in the game this morning doing anything to seal a point. City made sure they didn't lose to West Brom, which would have been an absolute crime. But managers who are up in the top six are making sure they don't lose, and Frank's pushing for the win. Should he have been playing for a draw there? Is that the right thing to try and press for that late winner?
Yeah, well, the contrast with Mourinho is huge, though, because I mean, Mourinho's sort of trying to take the heat off his players, at least at this stage, and Frank's borderline throwing his players under the bus. His after-match interview, he was saying that, hey, you guys might be thinking we're title challengers, but I know that these players are not quite there yet. And he was going on the sort of like, we haven't spent. He went on this sort of assertive about he was not expecting that much this so far. This is just where we're at, doing that sort of stuff. Now, the elephant in the room is the fact that they've spent so much money. That's the bottom line for Frank. I mean, like if he was just working with his squad from last year, then I think everyone would have more patience. But Chelsea fans are kind of like, we've just dropped 8 points in the last 12 available. That's huge, really, at this stage of the
straight
season.
From the Mourinho playbook, isn't it?
Maybe.
The owners open up the checkbook.
Yeah.
Then you start losing. Then
he's not going to get any sympathy for
players.
that. He's not going to get any sympathy for the money card because he has had so much spent on the squad. So I think what Frank needs to get better at is dealing with these barbs. I mean, I know that Klopp sometimes takes the bait, and I'm not saying that Klopp is a great example, but people were going to have a go at him. The media's going to have a go at him. People are going to get at him, and he's just going to have to grow thicker skin when it comes to these interviews.
Frank really reminds me of Robbie Fowler when he came to the A-League. Like, you know, they might have been a legend at their club, of course. Like now, Frank is at Chelsea where he was a legend, but they're sort of like these former players that are making the transition to being a manager, but they don't quite have that polish yet that you sort of need to front up the media, and they very easily just take the bait every time. And until they learn not to, they're going to be rattled by that kind of stuff, and it's going to be in their heads when they're managing, and they need to rise above that if they want to sort of take the next step as managers, I think.
That's the word you just used there, rattled. I think is the best way to describe it.
Yep. Leicester might have been a bit rattled after their 2-0 loss to Everton. We said going into this match after Everton's win against Chelsea the other week that this would be a test of their top 6 credentials, and it looks like they passed, Jesse. But is this a case of Everton good or Leicester bad?
Bit of both. Leicester have just been the most impossible team to read this season. It just seems like an on game, off game, on game, off game. I can't understand what's going on over there and what Rodgers is. I know that they are playing midweek, but so are other clubs. 1 week they're like, for example, this is a great example this week. So the game before this, they're getting told that they're on a title charge because they just dispatched Brighton, and then today we're talking about them just being so hot and cold, and Everton getting an away win 2-0. They didn't even. Leicester didn't even get a goal. Vardy didn't even get a goal. It was just. How are they going to progress any further than when they have in previous years if they can't sort of get back-to-back performances or string them together? It's like being a New Zealand cricket fan.
Well, I mean, you've got that struggle there, Jesse. But I mean, the middle of all the way from, I guess, like 15th still right up until the top of the table. It's just the biggest pillow fight in the Premier League at the moment. Nobody wants to take the game by the scruff of the neck. I mean, Liverpool have dropped some bad points this season and they're top of the table. Every team is just pretty much blowing hot and cold, including West Ham, who got a draw at Palace after a pretty good win the week before. This was a chance for West Ham to really keep pace with that top 4 and sort of break into the top 4. They could have gone as high as 4th if results went their way, but wasn't to be, despite a very tasty goal from Seb Allaire. That bicycle kick was just shades of other big West Ham strikers like Andy Carroll, Antonio, and other strikers who were on the same pitch. It was shades of Benteke as well, and Benteke actually got a goal in this one as well. Thoughts on this game?
Well, I hope there's a trampoline over at the military base where Tommy C's residing, because I'm pretty sure he would have gone straight out there and got his football and started trying a few of those himself. In fact, have you seen Tommy try one of those at futsal? It's the kind of thing I imagine he would do. Yeah, it was a pretty amazing goal. I mean, you've got to put some respect on that, and there were some great goals this round actually. But that was certainly
he really connected with it. Some of those bicycles you see, so it's sort of athletic, but they don't really get the connection right. This one, he really hit it. So
I think it's so funny too, because I saw a lot of people praising Kufau for the assist and how many assists he scored this season. I'm like, yeah, like obviously, he's assisted a lot of goals, but for God's sake, I don't think when he crossed the ball and you expected Haller to do that. That's where you sort of you just look at your striker and you say thanks very much.
Get your head on it, maybe.
But I actually, going back to what you said before, I think that out of all the teams, West Ham have been remarkably consistent compared to, we've just talked about Liverpool drawing to Fulham on the weekend and then beating Spurs. I mean, I think that West Ham, it's a draw, but I don't think the point at the end of the day will be the worst thing for them, actually. I mean, it's just, at least if you are going to have a cold week, try and get a point. I think that's kind of the trend of this season. It's like, don't lose all three. Just try and keep accumulating points, because you just don't know where you're going to drop them. So I think that seems to be the thing. I mean, that's the thing about this. That's why it's so devastating for Leicester and also for Chelsea. It's because both of those teams have dropped all three, and that could come back to bite them in the coming weeks.
I think so. And that's what we were saying about Chelsea as well. Like, you've got all of your competitors. Yes, you might be not having a great game, but at least get a point. And that seems to. I mean, I think you're right, Jesse. We're really seeing the return of the draw this season and the value of the draw.
Whereas now Sam's back.
Yeah,
so.
and Big Sam's going to work his magic and just shut the door and somehow keep West Brom up, which I think will be a miracle if he can do that. But the test, I guess, for West Ham will be next week when they play Chelsea, and a good time to play them as well. And Chelsea, I guess, are seem like they're in a run of not great form. So we'll really get to see West Ham to see if they're really up to it next week.
The Tommy George derby
weekend. The Tommy and George derby. So hopefully we get a good game there. What was a really good game, looked like a cracker. I didn't see the full game of this, was Leeds and Newcastle 5-2.
I did.
Sound the 7-goal thriller klaxon. The question we were sort of asking ourselves going into this game was, can Leeds stem the tide of goals? No, but it doesn't matter if you score 5.
I watched this, actually. There's 3 games obviously going on at the same time. And call me a fantasy tragic, but I had Bamford and Wilson in my team. So the dream result for me was for both of those players to get some kind of return, and it did end up happening. Wilson got an assist and Bamford scored as well. But other than that, Stu Dallas I put on my bench this week and was spewing to see him score a goal at the far post. But other than the Dallas goal, I mean, let's talk about the real highlights of this game. One of the great things about watching it live, which is, a bit of luck really, because I was watching that game as opposed to the other two, was the Rodrigo goal. Was just such a great goal. Just for Harrison's volley across the area, and then that header was just so good. And so at that point you thought you'd seen easily the best goal of the game, and then along comes Harrison later on and just scores an absolute screamer. Talk about, we used the word clinical before. Leeds still terrible at defending set pieces, and I still worry for them in that regard. But this was the week where they actually managed to just be so clinical in front of goal that it didn't matter.
They did have 25 shots, so and 5 goals is a good return, but
well, that's true. I guess Leeds is an anomaly with that. Leeds is a bit of an anomaly because they, most teams wouldn't take that many shots anyway. Leeds just, happily just spray them everywhere. So, you are right. Yeah.
And the final game of the round so far was Fulham 0, Brighton 0. I don't want to talk about this game. I don't want to talk about Brighton and their bullshit ways. Dropping Matty Ryan, not only not on the bench, but completely out of the squad for this game. Not a good day to be a Matty Ryan fan on Twitter, or even Matty Ryan on Twitter, because he was just copying it from the Brighton fans when they were delighting in him not being in the team, and it was shameful to see. Yeah,
it looks like a great example of scapegoatism, and I think I haven't watched too many Brighton games this season, but from what I have seen, I think if you go back to the game against Leicester just recently, they have been horribly exposed at the back on numerous occasions, and you can't blame your goalkeeper for that. I mean, you put most goalkeepers in the league in that position, and they're going to concede.
Exactly, and it was always going to happen under Potter. We thought it would happen last season, but what we're seeing is it's starting to happen this season. Like the type of football that Potter plays is much more expansive than under Houghton. So, of course, there are going to be situations where the goalkeeper's more exposed. People are wheeling out this low save percentage stat that's below Kepa's stat. So, obviously, he's not saving the ones that he's meant to save, or he's not saving as many as he should be. So, maybe he gets dropped down to the bench, but it's worrying that they've left him out of the squad altogether. But I guess the thing is, he's played over 100 games for Brighton now. And he's seen them through some pretty good times, and he's been quite dependable for them. And
he's captain them, isn't he?
Yeah, he's not captain, but I mean, I
But
think he's
I
worn
thought
the
he kept them at some stage, didn't he? Vice
I think
captain?
he's worn the armband before. He's not been the regular club captain, really, though. But I mean, he's seen them through some pretty good moments and been a great servant for the club. He's up there with, making the most saves in the league for the past couple of years. And to just sort of turn on a player like that after a couple of games of bad form is just absolute shit fan base.
I'm quite surprised with Brighton. I mean, I think many people are like this. I mean, there's just clearly a few shining lights in their team with Lamptey looking like a real talent. There's a few players there that are actually great players, but none of them seem to be, at least from a football perspective, they don't look happy. They just don't look like a team that is enjoying their role and their football. And it shows. Like, I was going to comment when we were in the Chelsea section about when they went down, they only had a few minutes left. And they were just passing the ball around, and they didn't look like they had the mentality to get that goal back. And that was something that I really noticed, because Liverpool just seemed just to go and go and go until the final whistle. Whereas I noticed teams that get the wind knocked out of them late in the game just tend to just give up. And I was a bit worried for Chelsea in that regard, because you could see that the players had kind of conceded they'd lost 2-1 when there was still like 2 or 3 minutes to go. Going back to Brighton, more like you see that pretty much weekly with Brighton. They seem to just, once they concede that goal, it's like the air's just gone out of them, and they don't really believe that they can get back in it, and they don't believe that they can score goals. And I actually think that some of that goes back to the start of the season, where I watched some of their early games, and they were all about passing and trying all these inventive things, but they just couldn't score. So they look nice on the ball.
That's the other thing, isn't it? Like when the likes of Mopé and Trossard, who are your usual sort of outlets for creativity and goals, when they're not performing, and you're changing it up at the front, that affects things all the way back as well. So it puts more pressure on your defense and more pressure on your goalkeeper when your forwards aren't scoring. Because as they say, sometimes the best form of defense is a good attack, as we know as fans of Liverpool and the way that they play. When the front three are on form, it really assists the back three. And that's what I think we're seeing at Liverpool, and why they're able to pull out some of these results, including some clean sheets, or at least conceding very few goals, even without the likes of Van Dijk and Gomez, is because the front three are still playing and performing well.
Exactly. You're getting returns from your attacking players. I mean, Mopé looks like, if he comes back in the second half of the season and becomes relevant again, it'll be a miracle, because he just looks absolutely shot at the moment. Like he looks like he's just being carried in the squad, and that Potter doesn't trust him. And he blew a penalty a few weeks ago, and he just, it's an amazing
straight away, which is actually like horrible for a player's confidence.
Yeah, amazing fall from grace.
I don't know what Potter's thinking, and we didn't mention that at the time, but like a player misses a pen and then you hook them. Like, what are you doing if you're Potter? Like, you're just absolutely shattering a player's confidence. But anyway, coming up next, we'll take a quick look at the Champions League round of 16 draw. So, Jesse, Monday, the round of 16 draw came out for the Champions League. And so we now know who's going to be playing each other. So you've got Gladbach against City, Lazio and Bayern, Atleti and Chelsea, Leipzig and Liverpool, Porto and Juventus, Barcelona and PSG, Sevilla and Dortmund, and Atalanta and Real Madrid. Firstly, what are your thoughts on the draw?
Well, Damo mentioned early in the week when we did the preview that he wanted to see Leipzig, Liverpool. He did say, with a caveat, that he didn't quite want to see it in the round of 16. Obviously there's no guarantee either of those teams are going to progress from the round of 16, but he wanted to sort of see it at some stage in the tournament. Maybe it's come a little bit early, but it's happened. And I think most people, whether you be a Liverpool fan or not, or a Leipzig fan or not, will be very excited about this. Now, I do note, actually, very much hot off the press, that Dominic Szoboszlai is actually look like he's going to sign for Leipzig.
That's a big signing.
From Salzburg. And it's not good news for me, and probably yourself as a Liverpool fan, because it's just going to be another person we have to worry about. But I do really like the look of him. And he will be one of those players that, kind of similar to Dortmund, he probably will spend a bit of time at Leipzig, and he's going to get snapped up by another club.
Liverpool in 2022.
Well, potentially. Maybe the YouTube video tricks and skills is already up there. But yeah, it will be a fascinating tie. And a couple of great managers going head to head, and I'm excited for it just anyway, just as a football fan. Other ones there, I mean, we also talked about PSG Barcelona having history. Well, to be honest, I mean, I don't know what Barcelona is going to bring to the table for this year, because they've looked pretty awful at times.
This will be a very, very open game. Two teams whose defensive records aren't the best at the moment, in particular. Yeah, I think this will be a cracking set of fixtures, Barcelona and PSG. Especially if the last time was anything to go by, and it's the Neymar and Messi reunion. So I think we'll see some hugs after the game, but I think we'll see a cracking game.
Spewing with City's fixture as well. Like, it's just like every year, like just pick the sort of least fancied team, and City will draw them. It just makes me sick.
They haven't done the best against some of the least fancied teams. I mean, they've had a really good campaign. Obviously, we talked about it on the pod last week. Their group stage was very good, but anything can happen in the knockouts, and we've seen them struggle against the likes of Lille, I think, or Marseille, one of the sort of non-PSG French teams they've struggled against. So I wouldn't rule anything out in Gladbach and Man City, because Gladbach will be hungry for it, obviously, and there's a lot of pressure on City, and I think playing a team like Gladbach will heap the pressure on Pep. So look out for some cracks in the arm, but particularly if they're still like trying to claw their way back into the top half of the Premier League, which is their expectations. They can't just coast in the Premier League either. So I think they'll be under a lot of pressure. So that could really play into it as well.
Sevilla devastated to not be in the Europa League, taking on Dortmund. I don't know about you. I mean, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for Dortmund, but one thing,
the German Liverpool,
yeah, but they tend to just get knocked out before they even sort of, you feel like there's any kind of steam. The train just doesn't ever seem to get going with them beyond the group stage. So I have to say I'd like to see them progress, because I'd just like to see how they would go if you get Haaland up against some of these more fancied teams. He is. I think one of the great shames about Haaland, for example, was I don't believe he's going to be at the Euros. But he just looks like such a talent, and I would just like to see him go deeper into the tournament, just because I want to see more of him in the tournament.
It's probably your only chance seeing him in a big tournament, seeing him at Dortmund or wherever he ends up next, because I don't know how far Norway are going to be going in big tournaments. So if we want to see Haaland go deep in these kinds of competitions, this is when we're going to want to see it. And Dortmund, I don't know, who knows, might be riding the new manager bounce still by then, with Favre getting the sack last week or the week before. So maybe they'll still be riding that and can build up a head of steam in the Champions League.
Speaking of riding that, Lazio, I mean, do we give them any chance against probably the competition favourites?
It's going to be really tough for Lazio to get anything against Bayern in two legs. So, look, I don't fancy them, particularly given the favourites have the home leg in the final. I don't know what the state of Europe's going to be and how much of an advantage that'll actually be. Like, will there be fans there? You wouldn't think so. So query how much of an advantage that'll be. But I mean, still, it's Bayern, and they just basically own this competition. Particularly in recent years, it's sort of been Bayern's or Real Madrid's, and obviously Liverpool have been strong in the past couple of years. But it's really been those guys that have sort of had a stranglehold over the competition.
Just a quick comment on the other fixtures, of course, because we do have a resident Juve fan, and you've got Porto. Obviously, has been drawn there. A really good chance for CR7 and Juve to sort of push on. So that you'd have to back Juventus there, even though that Porto can be a tricky game at times. But the one that I have to say I'm quite interested in is Atalanta Real Madrid, because Atalanta might as well be Italian for Thorn, because I can just see them being able to pull a performance out of their backside. And can Real deal with that? We've seen that they've got a bit better in recent times, but I just feel like Atalanta's
the kind of team that'll match up well against Real Madrid, I think. So I think that will be quietly a really great fixture as well. And the one key one that we haven't, and I think the only fixture that we haven't mentioned, is the Diego Costa derby at Letty and Chelsea. So I think that will be a good one as well. And yeah, I said last week on the pod that Atleti was the only team I wouldn't have wanted Liverpool to face in this round. So I think that'll be a very interesting one as well.
Well, hopefully Chelsea knocks them out and nobody else has to worry about them ever again.
Yeah, Chelsea need to get the job done here. But yeah, looking forward to all of that. Should be very tasty, and we'll be covering on the pod. So those round of 16 fixtures are scheduled for mid-Feb next year, with the second legs taking place in mid-March. We'll be covering on the pod. But that's probably going to do it for us today, Jesse. Nice and quick one compared to our usual hour-ish pods. But thanks very much for listening. If you've joined us on the podcast version of this, you can always find the YouTube version. We post links to it on our socials, and we've got links to all of our social media in the show notes to this podcast. So thanks again for listening. Next week on the pod, or on the weekend, we've got the A-League season preview special. And then it'll be back to BAU with the Premier League and the A-League fixtures rolling on. But until then, enjoy the football.